So today we conclude this series on the enneagram, and hopefully you've gained some knowledge. Maybe it was the first time you've ever heard about it. Maybe it's a refresher course, but I hope you were able to connect with the sermons, with the workshop, those of you that went, and also to the noon prayers that will continue to roll out there over the next few weeks. But let me start by saying here are 3 things not to do with any knowledge that you may have gained. Number 1, don't weaponize it. Don't say to someone, stop acting like a 2. That's something you should only say to yourself, and with love if you're a 2. Number 2, don't use it as an excuse for your behavior. Don't say, I'm an 8, deal with it. No, that's not what we're doing. It's not an excuse not to do your homework. In fact, what it does is it points out our homework assignment. Your number is your homework assignment. And then number 3, don't diagnose everybody else. Don't say, you're a 4, you're a 7, you're a 9. No. First of all, most of the time you'll be wrong. And second of all, you rob the other person of that moment of discovery when you realize what number you are. Now, sometimes that discovery can hit like a ton of bricks, as it did for me out in Albuquerque, New Mexico, over 8 years ago, when I was part of the first cohort of the Living School. And for an entire week, I was at the Center for Action and Contemplation with Father Richard Rohr, and 20 of us had access to Father Rohr for the entire week, 8 to 5 every day, talking about all kinds of things. And after the first day, he said, okay, guys, what do you want to talk about tomorrow? So I raised my hand. I said, I'm interested in the enneagram. I've heard a lot about it. I don't know much about it. Would you be willing to teach on the enneagram? He said, sure. So Tuesday and Wednesday was all about the enneagram. I was sitting at the feet of one of the master teachers of the enneagram in our time. And he was going through all the numbers. And when he touched upon the number 2 right before lunch, I remember having this adverse reaction. The 2s are the helpers. They are the kinds of people who need to be needed, the kinds of people, if it was cold in here, would be giving everybody else a blanket except themselves. And as I was learning about the 2, I was like, oh my God, those needy people. I was thinking about the needy people in my life, and then all of a sudden it hit me, oh my God, I'm a 2. I was slayed. And we went to lunch, and I was more quiet than usual. And then after lunch, I just went for a walk. I needed some time to be alone. And so I was walking, and I noticed my friend Matt, who is a physician from Georgia, and I went over to him, and he looked kind of sad. And I said, how you doing? And he looked at me, and he said, I can't believe I'm a 2. And I said, I can't believe I'm a 2, and we literally hugged it out. We laugh about it now, but we were pretty devastated. Sometimes when we discover something about ourselves, it can hit us like a ton of bricks. It can be like a full body blow. And what I didn't realize is that is actually how people who live in the body and live in the gut experience life more often than not. In fact, Richard, who is part of this tribe, will often say, I experience a full body blow every 3 minutes of my life. If you resonated with today's words that Liz read from the prophet Isaiah, then maybe the gut is your dominant center. Listen to these words. Awake, awake, rise up, break forth, shout, depart, go out there, get out there, do something. For the Lord has bared his arm, and the Lord will go before you and be your rear guard. Last night at the square dance, we did the hokey pokey, and if you are in the body of the gut center, you don't want to put your finger in and your toe. You want to jump in there with your body, your whole self. You want to put your whole self in. When Jesus talks about love, and he says, love God with your head and your heart, the part about strength is what resonates for gut people. And in many ways, they have a head start because they live in the body. People who live in the heart tend to live in the past. We can be very sentimental. People who live in the head often live in the future. They're worried about all the contingencies that might happen. But people who live in the gut, live in the body, live in the moment. They are present at their best. They're grounded and confident and alive and awake in the present moment. But before I go too far, stroking the gut people, you guys have some work to do as well, just like the heart and head people. You see, people who come from the gut often are dealing either on a conscious or unconscious level with anger. And because they can be very angry, they seek to establish control or authority over the environment and over other people. They are first and foremost concerned with power and with control. And they can react viscerally, impulsively to reality in the moment. When a gut person enters the room, they often can decide in like a minute or so whether they like or don't like something. And they feel it quickly in their bones. And yet within this tribe, there are some differences. There is the 8 and the 9 and the 1, which are the 3 numbers in the gut tribe. And the 8 are known as defenders. They try to control reality by fighting back and imposing or seeking to impose their will on other people or on an environment. The 9s are the peacemakers, and they try to control by backing off and trying to keep the peace. 1s are the reformers, and they try to exert control by fixing or reforming reality, making it better. But as different as they may seem, anger is their driving motivation. 8s ride their anger to be this commanding, intense, in-your-face presence. It was said of Frank Sinatra, who was an 8, that you could feel his presence 15 minutes before he entered the room. Now, 9s are interesting because they're out of touch, disconnected from their anger. They're blind to it or they're numb to it, and so they go along to get along, hoping to keep that anger at bay, but it always leaks out in passive-aggressive behavior. And 1s try to reframe their anger as frustration. And they channel that frustration to this almost compulsive desire for perfection. They want everything to be perfect. They'll walk into this space right now and notice like one thing out of place, and it'll drive them crazy because it's not perfect. Isaiah was probably a gut person. Wake up. Rise up, get out there, do something, defend the vulnerable, make peace, bring reform. Dr. Martin Luther King, the great prophet of the 20th century, was clearly living in this tribe. If you think about what King got more and more frustrated with, it was the white, moderate, lukewarm Christian who stood on the sidelines, didn't get into the mix. He was frustrated with inaction, and it drove him nuts. And he said, if you can't fly, then at least run. And if you can't run, then at least walk. And if you can't walk, then at least crawl. Because whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. That's good gut energy. One of you shared this story that bears repeating in your view from the pew recently of Michelle Nichols, who was one of the original cast members of NBC's Star Trek, which you may recall, apart from Captain Kirk, was a very diverse crew. There was Spock, who was half human, half Vulcan. There was Sulu, who was Asian. There was Chekhov, who was a Russian. And then there was Lieutenant Nyota Uhuru, played by Nichols, who was an African-American female. And she was, at the time, the first ever African-American person to assume a continuing role on a TV show predicated on equality with all of the cast members. Now, the decision to hire such a diverse cast was very intentional. Apparently, Gene Roddenberry had this dream, this vision of a world where you could assemble a working team without regard to nationality, gender, or ethnicity. And so after the first season, Nichols was ready to move on. She wanted to go back to Broadway, which was where she had been before she was signed. And so she went to Roddenberry and submitted her resignation. Roddenberry was just devastated. And he said, would you please at least take the weekend to think about it? And so she agreed she wouldn't make her final decision to the end of the week. So that weekend, she happened to go to a celebrity gala in LA for the NAACP, and one of the coordinators of the gala went up to her and said, "Your greatest fan is here." And she was like, "Oh no, it's going to be some strange adolescent Trekkie who's going to want to spend the rest of the night with me." Well, it turns out her greatest fan was Martin Luther King, and he saw her with this big grin on his smile, and he went up to her. He said, "Yes, I'm your greatest fan. You see, Coretta and I allow our kids to stay up late to watch only one television show, and it's yours. And you're the reason, because we want them to see a black woman in a leadership role, and we want them to imagine that they too someday can be in a leadership position." Well, she felt horrible and she let it slip out that she had just tendered her resignation. And King got in her face and says, "You can't do that. We're all counting on you. We're marching out on the streets so that you can be there." She felt horrible, but she was also annoyed. Who is this guy telling me what to do with my life? And so she wrestled with that over the weekend. And then finally, Monday morning, she decided she would stay in the role. And so she told Roddenberry, "You can rip up my resignation." Well, apparently the legend is he had already done that. But when she told him why, he was moved to tears that Martin Luther King would care enough about her role. Well, she stayed on in that role for the next couple years. Then she actually was part of the first 6 Star Trek feature films, and she became a person who not only became a great star, but she helped women and people of different ethnic backgrounds move into roles in the space program, even becoming astronauts. And today, there's an asteroid named after her. The enneagram is a powerful tool, but we got to use it. We got to work with it. It's powerless if we don't work with it. Our enneagram number, whatever it is, shows us our greatest gift, but it also points out our greatest stumbling block, the thing that gets in our way too often if we're not conscious of it. Remember, the goal here is multiple brain integration. It's accessing the head center, the heart center, and the gut center as often as we can and developing those muscles so that we can make better decisions, more wise and loving decisions. But the thing is that we all kind of live across this continuum. Every number is equally good or bad, depending on how we're acting out of it. But the healthiness moves up and down our numbers. So a healthy 2 looks very similar to a healthy 8 or a 7 or whatever. We become more integrated the healthier we become. But when we're under stress, some of those unhealthy patterns come out, and some of those unconscious drives steal our energy and our attention and can make us really do some very unwise things. Viktor Frankl said that in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, between a stimulus and a response, there is a space. And within that space lies our freedom and our power. There's a space between the stimulus and the response, and that's where the work happens. That's where we have a choice, an opportunity to choose wisely, to choose well. So if we're a heart person, what tends to happen is shame rushes in to fill that space. Or if we're a head person, fear rushes into that space. Or if we're a gut person, anger can rush into that place and steal our attention and steal our energy. And the goal is to work with that space so that we're not being reactive, so that we're able to respond with our best self, our head, our heart, and our gut. And there are many ways that we can work with this space. Too many to count. I mean, you can count from 10 to 1 and just wait before you respond. You can go outside for a walk. You can sit in silence. You can open the scriptures and return to your favorite passage. You can repeat a mantra or a sacred word. You can sit on your prayer stool or on your yoga mat. There are so many ways that you can work creatively with the space. But let me just share one practice that many Enneagram teachers share. It's called SNAP. And it's an acronym for Stop, Notice, Ask, Pivot. 4 steps that we can do all the time, anytime. So the best way to stop an unconscious pattern is to stop, just to pause. Before the shame takes over, before the fear takes over, before the anger. Get in touch with the moment, with your body, with the weight of your feet on the ground. Just stop. And then notice what's happening. What's happening within me? What's happening around me? Be aware of your feelings, your thoughts. Be aware of what your body is saying, because the heart knows and the head knows, but so does the body. So what is it that you need to notice? Not to fix it or change it or condemn yourself or criticize, just to be aware is such a powerful step. And then ask yourself a question. What am I believing about what is happening right now, within me, with around me? I know as a 2, I go to shame, so sometimes I'll think to myself, God, who are you to sit there, to stand up in front of people and preach a sermon? You're the worst preacher in the world. How dare you? That's where I can go, right? But we have a choice. Ask ourselves the question, do I need to believe that narrative right now? What's the narrative that you tell yourself when you experience shame or fear, anger? And is it really true? Do you have to believe it? Asking yourself that question can bring such clarity. And then finally, pivot. You don't have to continue the unconscious pattern. You can make a different choice. You can pivot in a new direction. And by doing that, you're using all 3 of your brains, and you're right-sizing your dominant brain so it doesn't hijack you and steal the show like it often wants to do. Years ago, I was struggling with a question, a big question. What was I going to do next in my life? And I was really at a loss for what to do. And so I called up one of my trusted mentors, and I said, can I speak to you for a little bit? Because I don't know what to do. And in the course of our conversation, he shared with me something that St. John of the Cross used to share with his spiritual direction people. And he would ask them 3 questions when they were truly stumped about what to do, what was the right thing to do, the path to walk. He said, ask 3 questions. Ask yourself, how does this decision, whatever that might be that you're thinking about doing, how does it fit with your head? How does it fit with your heart? And how does it fit with your mystical path? Now that one on the surface doesn't seem to connect with this 3 centers, but as I thought about it, our mystical path is kind of that thread that's working itself through our lives. And if you look back, you think about how many decisions you just stepped in and you did it. It was almost as if you were thrust upon it, and you found the way by walking, by doing something. I think that's where the gut comes in. Sometimes we just got to take a step, even when we don't know if we're ready. I think gut people are a gift to the world because they challenge us to take that step. I remember someone got in my face once, challenged me to take a step as a leader that I was not probably ever going to take if I was going to sit in my feelings and my thoughts. And so that's the gift of the gut center people. The enneagram, I think, is based in this idea that there are many faces to the love of God. Clearly, God works through the helpers, right? Clearly, God works through the defenders. Clearly, God works through the reformers, the individualists, the artists, the loyalists. God works through all of it. And where the enneagram can be such a powerful tool is that its goal is to help us relax our paralytic grip on the one dimension of God's character that is most comfortable for us, so that our hands can be more open to receive the other characteristics of God's love that our clenched fists won't allow. As we become healthier and we work with that space, we claim our freedom and our power to love first ourselves, each other, and God with all our mind, with all our heart, and with all our strength. As we close, let me offer this prayer by John O'Donohue that I think captures the spirit of where to go with self-knowledge and how it can become a gift of love to the world. He writes, "May you recognize in your life the presence, power, and light of your soul. May you realize that you are never alone, that your soul in its brightness and belonging connects you intimately with the rhythm of the universe. May you have respect for your individuality and difference. And may you realize that the shape of your soul is unique, that you have a special destiny here, that behind the facade of your life, there is something beautiful and eternal happening. May you learn to see yourself with the same delight, pride, and expectation with which God sees you in every moment."